welcome to Super Respectable. My name is David Lewis, coming at you from the city of Peace and Justice, The Hague. And with me in studio is Tosh. How are you?
I'm good. I'm in studio from Istanbul, formerly known as Constantinople, the head of
Eastern Roman Empire.
Eastern Roman Empire, and then the Ottoman Empire. So
yeah,
we both have.
That was the worst class I had in Carleton University. I failed, I think, that class.
I wish
I didn't understand it.
My love of history has really spawned post-university as opposed to during and pre-university. So if I could go back, I would have definitely kept history as like a minor or a major, I think.
Yeah, I did history as a minor because we both did political science, right? And
unfortunately,
I did history, unfortunately. And the situation with Carleton was a bit strange. Like we paid money to be educated, but we didn't get the courses that you wanted. So it was like luck of the draw. Each year is like you found out the lottery where you fit in. And so one year I really got like maybe I was late or something, or the internet wasn't working. And I ended up missing like my turn. And I ended up getting like the bottom of the barrel courses. And one of them was the history of Byzantium.
Yeah.
So I was totally lost. They talked about Constantinople.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand anything. So that didn't work out very well.
I definitely, how long has it been since we graduated? Almost 13 years, right? 13, 14 years.
Oh yeah, a long time ago.
I think the university educational system, the way it's built, is completely flawed and negative and has no unproductive. We can do an entire episode one day on it, but if I could go back, I mean, they should really be restructure the whole thing. It's just this capitalist like thing that just produces these workers, and like you don't get to study.
We just felt like cattle. Like first year, 300 people in a classroom.
Horrible.
Really.
And I think the whole I don't know. I think there are a few places in the world that are not the same. But I think whether you're speaking of Carleton University in Ottawa, where we went, or Harvard in Boston, or Oxford in the UK, I think Western education really has changed from what it should be, especially in the liberal arts departments. But
yeah, I mean, like you said, we can do a whole episode on this. But I really think when I was in high school, they really looked down upon people who did trades and becoming plumbers and electricians. And I'm like, I kind of wish I had a hard skill like that. And I think there's definitely a surplus of people doing like the type of degrees that we were doing. So anyways,
I mean, you and I are talking about the issues where some technician or engineer is probably editing a podcast and they're probably more skill oriented than you and I, but I agree. I think I have, like I said, everything that I couldn't do in life or learned, I can pass on to my kids. But whether you're working like a blue collar job or a white collar job, or you learn from here or the college, I think there's a need for everyone, and so I definitely agree. If I could have gone back, I probably wouldn't have mind going to college. Like some of our colleagues did post-university as well. They went in, they got more hands-on experience. So keep learning. Anyways, this is our episode post-election. So I think it's very clear now that we have a new president. Well, not we, the states.
The states, yeah. One world government.
One world government. What's your thoughts, your feelings? How did the week play out? Because it wasn't an instantaneous result, right? It took 4 days.
Yeah, I got a bit burnt out from it. It was actually kind of how I expected it to go initially, because strangely enough, the media and the public or whoever was thinking it was a done deal for Biden. Trump is terrible and what have you, but he still had tons of support, and it wasn't reflected in the polls once again. So like the polls, if you compare it with the election results, were off again, not to the same degree as it was in 2016. But he definitely outperformed what he was expected to do, and it resulted in that kind of gridlock we had for days on end. I just got a bit tired of watching. I watched CNN kind of religiously for the first 24 hours or so, and then I'm like, this isn't going to get solved anytime soon, and I just said I'll wait until alert comes on my phone or something.
We were talking before we started recording how Trump got 70 million of popular votes. And that is higher. I mean, of course, Biden, I guess, would get 75 million, which is the most in history, but Trump would be the second most in history. And it's crazy to think that many people supported the man, the ideology, the movement. It's scary. Yes. I guess maybe them and us. I feel like it's the completely different mindsets. I can't even understand why you would go with Trump, even if you're divided or on the middle. You know, why would you lean that way? But it's scary to think that many people think that this man, that they wanted this man to be their president for another 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, we can argue about the policies, and for sure there's merit for, you know, the conservative point of view, but it's just his ways of carrying it out and his manner, which is just totally repugnant to me. I mean, I don't mind necessarily if you have a conservative way of doing things, but just be respectful. Be like, for example, I don't know if you're watching these CNN panels where they had this one Republican panelist. I think his name was Rick Santorum. Right.
Yeah, he was a senator before, or a governor.
Senator.
Before. Yeah, senator.
And I think he was quite conservative, but I really respected the way he spoke and responded to criticisms and challenges. And I thought, okay, well, I could understand votes going towards this person because he's getting criticized and he's not responding by attacking, you know, someone's eyes or their hair color or their skin color. He's responding to the issues. Whereas Trump would just go like Armageddon, red button, and just, you know, attack personally people and say really horrible things, which is not someone that, you know, they say in the US, one day you'll be president, you should look up to the president. But for me, he was not someone you should look up to. Absolutely.
You should. Have you seen the campaign ads between the Republican and the Democrat in Utah? They were in the same campaign.
Yeah.
I really thought, well, I'll post it up. I thought that was a great approach. They had completely different ideologies, but they were very respectful, and they promoted respect and unity during this time, even with differing points of view. And I am on the same page with you. I think some conservative Republican ideologies in its pure form are good. I mean, I myself associate more with the left, but I would respect it. I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think this was more of an issue of character and dignity as opposed to the politics. But a lot of people argue that Trump's Republican Party is not the real Republican Party. They've shifted it a lot, but I'm just glad that at least we don't have to stress out for the next 4 years to this level that we did. I mean, with Trump, literally it was 4 years of like tweets and just completely untrue information, fake news, as he would call it, you know, and like it really just put a damper on the entire political world, whether it was like something with the Paris Accords, or whether it was the Muslim ban, whether it was his relationship with the rest of the world. It was just a problem. And like, I don't know, but like I feel like after COVID's over now, I would actively go to the States. Whereas in the last 4 years, I really was just like, I don't want to go there. I don't know if I didn't for other reasons, but I didn't have any inclination to go, you know?
No, I feel the same way. It still feels like a very tense time in the United States. Yes. And there's probably a lot more to play out with this thing. I mean, who knows how far he'll push this with his so far refusal to accept defeat. So I just hope that he eventually accepts that he lost, and it's a smooth transition. So
I think there's a really good book. It's on my list. It's from his niece, Mary Trump, the psychologist or the therapist.
Yeah,
who diagnoses her uncle's mental state and says he's unwell. But whether it's that or the business mindset, like losing is not something I think he accepts nor knows how to do graciously. So even if I see him conceding, I think it'll be with a but, blah 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 blah, you know. Or I think in his mind, it's delusional in the sense that he might even think of himself as the greatest president of all time. I wouldn't put it over him, you know. So I think at this point, well, you can't really reason with people like this. You just got to get them out, which is going to happen on January 20th, whether by force or voluntarily. But I'm glad. I'm glad at least it's over. I'm glad I don't have to watch CNN for 4 straight days. I'm glad I don't have to watch these guys. I have to give a lot of credit to those commentators on CNN. These guys just kept talking and talking and talking.
Yeah, I mean, they're getting paid for it, but I would lose interest in my own words at a certain point. And there's a particular guy, which I'll forget his name, John something. He was in charge of the map. For me, he gets a shout out because he was constantly going, this county. He knew the details of like every little town and city in the United States and where their voting intentions were. Every time they asked him, like, can you clarify this? Can you say this? He was just on it the whole time.
I think I learned a lot about American geography as well. Phoenix is in Mariposa County, Arizona. It's got the, but the coolest, I have to say, just before we wrap up, I think the coolest thing was Pennsylvania for me, and how Trump was leading, and then all those mail-in votes came in, and then you could see him equal up for a couple, and then it was like it was the same for a couple of days, and then he kind of beat him, and I thought that was kind of cool. So like, but it's a lot. It's like, I can definitely understand why people really enjoy this kind of stuff, and then this is their thing, but it's just a lot of information and data.
It's a crazy system. I mean, from an outsider's perspective, I just don't see why they don't do, whoever has the most votes wins. It would just solve all this electoral college back and forth.
Don't you think also, like, so I was kind of watching, I don't know this in fact, but I know there's a combination. I know people do it on paper votes, and then they put it through a system in a computer who kind of like analyzes it. Do you think there's ever a chance that the system could, and I learned also that voting is not a federal responsibility.
It's administered by the individual states, right?
That's the different rules. Do you think they could ever move to a computerized system where results could come out instantaneously, or there's too much room for fraudulent corruption?
It would be too complicated in the U.S. system, I think. Possibly in Canada, which has a federal elections body, Elections Canada, to run it. But I guess the paranoia is that it could get hacked by, a hostile state.
Yeah, interesting. Anyways, it's over. 2 years of campaigning. 2 years of campaigning, 4 days of waiting, and then now 2 months of transition, and
life goes on.
C'est la vie. So
this week I'm excited to talk about, it's Remembrance Day. It's coming up on, I think it's Wednesday. Right? I lose track of the days in COVID times. So November 11th. So I thought I would talk about something related to that.
Cool. Do you want to? Is Remembrance Day pretty common globally, or just be for countries who?
That's the thing. When I moved to Europe, I was a bit surprised that Remembrance Day wasn't Remembrance Day, as we know it in Canada.
Yeah.
I believe it's only Commonwealth countries that commemorate it on the 11th of November, and possibly also the United States. Yeah. So rest of world, they all have their days. I know Russia has its day in May, I think, like Victory in Russia Day. The Netherlands is also when they were liberated. So there's like individual like liberation days. But because of, the British Empire and the way it was, we kind of fell into that date.
No. 11.
Aligned with that.
I grew up with 11/11 and a minute of silence and the poppies on the lapels. So yeah.
Do you know what it is in India and Bangladesh? Is there a similar date, or is it?
I don't know India. In Bangladesh, there isn't. We don't do Remembrance Day, even though the Brits were sort of part of that part of the world, the subcontinent. There is like a day when the Bangladeshis gained independence from Pakistan, so because there was a massive war between the two. So not a war, I'm sorry, a split. There's just a day of like when they were formed as a nation, but and there's like a Martyrs Day, and there's a couple other military day things, but I don't know the Remembrance Day thing. I don't think we have it.
I guess if anything, there would be something similar to the British date, but possibly there's sensitivities around the like colonial aspect to it.
Here in Turkey, they celebrate every day that's related to their empire. So there's the day like they became their own country, the day it was Ataturk's birthday, the day 4 years ago when there was like a potential coup. Like they do a lot, and it's very, very like evident. They have like banners and red and flag and Ataturk's face, and so it's interesting to watch. I guess.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing for me here as a Canadian living in the Netherlands is that Canada liberated the Netherlands.
Oh,
so
really?
There's a special connection here. And one of the crazy things is where we live in The Hague, it's quite a central street. And there's a square right across from us.
Yeah.
And last year, I think it was, when I woke up in May, there was military, 40s, World War II tanks and like jeeps and stuff going up and down the street, but with Canadian flags. And I thought, what is going on? Because it hadn't dawned on me that it was the Dutch like commemoration date. But then there was a big Canadian component to it because it was the Canadians' role in liberating the country.
Yeah.
So I was all over that and, you know, reading up on it and checking it out.
Yeah.
And which brings me to the story for today.
Sure.
I want to talk about this Canadian soldier who I think is one of the most badass soldiers I've ever heard of.
Okay.
And he was involved in the liberation of the Netherlands. And his name, he's a French Canadian, actually.
Yeah.
So I'm going to anglicize his name. Apologies to everybody for that. But his name is Léo Major, but I'm going to say Léo Major. It's really botching it. But there you go.
Okay. Léo Major.
So he was the only Canadian to receive the Distinguished Conduct Medal in 2 wars. So that's a medal that's like one below like the Victoria Cross, which is like the top thing you could get in the British Empire.
Yeah.
And Commonwealth. And his name is also a bit of nominative determinism. Like his name is Major and he was in the army. So it's kind of interesting that that's something that happened to him.
Was he a major in the army, his ranking?
That would have made things a lot easier, but no, I think he was a corporal. I really am not good at knowing the different levels within the army. I think he was kind of like a mid-ranking army officer.
Yeah.
But apparently he was quite a rebellious dude. And so he was a really like brave soldier and was involved in a lot of like very intense battles. And so he was rewarded for that. And they kind of looked the other way about his rebellious side and like kept him going. But I'm for sure almost any other soldier who pulled off some of the stunts he did would have been like kicked out and sent
really
home. So I'll kick it off. He was born in the US actually in 1921, but to French Canadian parents. And they moved back to Canada in the year he was born. So they moved, he grew up in Montreal. But he didn't have a good relationship with his dad. And so he went to live with his aunt at the age of 14. And I guess it was, you know, in the 30s in Montreal, it was Great Depression times. And he kind of struggled for money and didn't really have much of a job. I mean, take it for granted that he was still a teenager at the time. But things weren't looking too good for him. And but it coincided with World War II kicking off when he was 18. So he enlisted in the Canadian Army.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether it was a choice or if it was forced upon him. I'm sure there was some conscription element in Canada. So he enlisted in the Canadian Army, wanted to make his dad proud because he hadn't really done much with his life up until that point. I think he was being a bit hard on himself. He was still only 18 years old.
Baby, yeah.
So apparently he spent like 4 years. I guess maybe he was a bit too young. And so they put him in some training regimen in Canada and in Scotland. And he first saw action in 1944 for the D-Day landing. So imagine that's your first introduction to war, which is the biggest battle of all time in D-Day.
Yeah.
So he was involved in the landings in Normandy.
Wow.
And he made an impact from day one. He single-handedly captured a German armored vehicle, which contained radios and the secret codes to like encrypted Nazi communications.
No way.
So this helped the Allies to listen in on the orders that were coming from the Nazi headquarters in Berlin.
Yeah.
So from day one, he was already doing crazy stuff. Then a few days later, he lost an eye in a battle with a group of Nazi SS soldiers. So like this is like the elite Nazi military group, really scary dudes. But he managed to kill several of the soldiers in that battle. But one of them, as he was like in his last act dying, he threw a grenade towards Major.
Yeah.
And it exploded near him, and he ended up losing sight in his, or he lost his left eye.
No way.
But he said he refused to be evacuated, and he said, "I'm fine. I need my right eye to shoot from. I'll be fine."
Okay. I'm trying to look around with my right.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's entirely correct because you might not.
Peripheral
anyway, seem to work for him.
Okay.
And so he ended up looking a bit like a pirate, which added to his like Rambo badass look.
Yeah.
It made him look like quite a scary dude.
Yeah.
So the war progressed. The Allies were pushing in to liberate Europe. Went through France and then into Belgium and the Netherlands, which were under Nazi occupation.
Yeah.
So he took part in the Battle of Skeld. Pardon my pronunciation, everybody. And just a little caveat to the story. It's a war, and a lot of the facts seem to have blended in with like his other battles. So I'm just going to tell it as I saw it online, and we'll take it as it comes here.
You're the author of your story.
I'm the author of his story. So later in 1944, he actually managed to capture 93 Nazi soldiers on his own in this Battle of Skeld in the Dutch area of Zeeland.
Okay.
Apparently, it all started because he was pissed off that it was cold and rainy outside, and he saw like two Nazis on patrol, and he ended up capturing one. And when the other guy was running around, he shot the other one. Yeah. And then the other ones kept coming, and he kept on like taking them down and bringing them towards the Canadian troops for capture.
Yeah.
So that was quite an impressive feat, and he was awarded a medal.
Yeah.
For bravery, but he declined the medal because he thought that the Allied General Commander Montgomery was incompetent and useless. So he declined the award.
That's always good. Go against your supervisors.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would probably mark one against his status in the army for his, his bosses probably wouldn't be too happy that he turned down that award. But anyways, they were very happy he captured 93 Nazis.
Do you know, just a quick question, do you know, like, is it like it's just permit, like you have the option, the choice in whatever military you are not to accept an award, or is it kind of the default standard that you would accept the award?
I mean, it seems a bit bizarre that you would be so angry towards the Allied commander that he would say no thanks. I mean, I would just say, yeah, thank you very much, and put it somewhere.
Are you supposed to, when you get awards or medals and stuff? You just like it's like part of your file, like it's an achievement, like, or do you?
For sure,
right?
You get you get a badge or a pin on your uniform, and it's like part of your whole army file for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. If you had like a hockey card, an army hockey card, it'd be like, oh, won this medal in this day, right?
Exactly. Most valuable player type of thing.
We should explain it, hockey cards, to our young listeners. I don't think, do they still exist? I don't even know.
I don't think so. I mean, it was supposed to be my retirement package to save me, but I think that's not really going to work out so well for me anymore.
I have, yeah, me too. I have a bunch of them in my crawl space at my mom's and dad's house, and they're just sitting there. They're supposed to be rich. I was supposed to be like a billionaire by now, but I think I've lost money on them.
I think just hold on to them because things coming back in fashion. Pokemon cards are really big now again. So
yeah,
you never know.
There you go. Sorry, please continue, Dave.
So yeah, no worries. So after that battle, he ended up getting into trouble again, health-wise. He was in a vehicle that ran over a mine, so he ended up getting blown off the car, landing on his back and breaking his back.
Yeah.
So he was taken to hospital and given a ton of morphine, and I think he must have been high on something because apparently he broke out of the hospital to rejoin the troops at the front. And I think that's also something he could have been kicked out of the army for, because you're supposed to, follow the orders and do what they say.
Yeah.
But they figured, well, he did a lot of cool stuff for us already, so okay, we'll take you. Yeah. And it's a good thing they did, because this is where things really got crazy. He in April 1945, he single-handedly liberated the Dutch city of Zwolle.
No way. How single-handedly?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So again, here the facts are a bit all over the place, but I'll tell it as I see fit. So he and his friend volunteered. His friend's name was Willie Arsenault. This was apparently his closest friend. They went on a reconnaissance mission in Zwolle. So they were sent there to scope it out at night, and then to take notes on where they thought the Nazi positions were. And then the following day, there would be an invasion, and they'd have bombings and, be able to have the attack. Unfortunately, his friend was sighted by the Nazis in this mission, and he was killed.
Yeah.
And this incensed Léo Major. He was so angry. He said, "I'm going to take over the town myself." He said, "Forget this reconnaissance mission." And he just lost it and went on a bit of a rampage. So what he did, he managed to liberate the city in one day. I'm not sure the population of Zwolle back then. It couldn't have been more than 40, 50,000. Could be off, but still, it's a city.
Yeah.
And he started off by capturing a Nazi officer who was having a drink at the local bar.
Yeah.
So it was late at night. So people were drunk, and he walked in with his gun, and he didn't kill the Nazi officer. He just said, "Hey, I'm this guy." Apparently, they could communicate. It was very lucky for him because he spoke French, and the Nazi officer spoke French because the Nazi officer was from Alsace, like the kind of formerly French part of Germany. And so he said, "Hey, just to let you know, the Canadians are coming to invade tomorrow. So go and leave the bar now and tell your troops."
Yeah.
And so he kind of wanted to instill a bit of fear into the Germans who were there.
Yeah.
But he had no intention on waiting for that. So that was his first act. And then so what happened next? Then he made it seem like the city was coming under attack. Yeah. He had a bunch of grenades on him, and he just started throwing them into different directions and shooting and making it seem like things were coming from all directions. And so the Nazis started thinking, wow, he was right. He wasn't lying. The attack is coming.
Yeah.
And so he ended up capturing a few Nazis like he did previously in the Battle of Skjold. And apparently he grabbed them in like sections. He saw like 10 hanging about. He like pointed his gun at them and said, like, go this way. Went back to dropped them off where the Canadians were, went back again. And I don't know what the Canadians who were like monitoring this mission were thinking. Like maybe they should have stopped him, but I guess they figured again, his track record is very good. So let him do what he wants.
Yeah.
And there's some debate. There's some debate whether this happened, but apparently he set the Gestapo headquarters in the town on fire as well. And by this point, the Nazis really thought like things are going bad, and they just gave up or they fled the town.
Yeah. And
so they didn't need to bombard the city and destroy it. The Canadians just sort of walked in the next day and took over the city. And liberated the city. So he has a street named after him now in the city of Zwolle.
Yeah.
And this is where he was awarded his first and accepted his first award, the Distinguished Conduct Medal.
Yeah.
So that's very impressive. I think that's enough of a track record for any soldier, but he wasn't finished.
So this is 1945 now, Warren?
This is 1945, pretty much the end of the war in Europe.
Yeah.
And so that's all she wrote for World War II as Léo Major was concerned. Yeah. So he went back to Canada, became a pipe fitter, some sort of tradesman.
Crazy.
But things continued to kick off around the world, and the Korean War happened in the 50s.
Yeah.
And so that was the United Nations' first big battle. It's weird to think of the United Nations as a bunch of troops invading a country, but they were called into Korea to, fight against the Chinese and I think the Russians were involved. Stalin possibly was there. And so the Allies came to help push the North Koreans and the Chinese to try and liberate the Korean Peninsula.
Yeah.
So Léo Major got involved in that war.
Wow.
And he, in one battle, he was tasked with leading a group of soldiers to take back a hill that was lost by the Americans. They were coming under like heavy fire by the Chinese. And so the Americans like fled and gave up. So his tactic was to take off all their army boots and put on running shoes.
Yeah.
And so that they could go at night and sneak, make less noise. And then they somehow managed to like infiltrate this hill in Korea. And at night, they started they were in the middle of this hill somehow around all these Chinese troops. Then they just started shooting wildly again, and the Chinese freaked out and just ran because they didn't understand they were possibly coming under friendly fire from like a crazy Chinese soldier, and they fled.
What's friendly fire mean?
It's like coming from your own side.
Oh, okay, like an accidental or something.
Accidental thing. So they were confused as to how this had happened. That he had infiltrated with his team and ended up shooting in the middle of where the Chinese battalion was. Yeah. So they fled, and then they regrouped. They went down the hill. They brought back like two massive, I guess, battalions or divisions.
Yeah.
But he refused to move, and he did something pretty crazy. He just hung out on this hill with his crew, and he called it in Allied bombings.
No way.
Basically where his position was. So the guy's like, "Are you sure you want us to drop bombs? Because you guys are there." He's like, "Yeah, they're coming. Just drop the bombs and take them out."
Yeah.
He didn't really care. The bombs were going off like left, right, and center all around him.
Yeah.
And it worked. He managed to capture that hill, and for that he was awarded his second Distinguished Combat Conduct Medal.
So Léo, at this point, he's serving on the Canadian Army or the UN Army, or
I guess it was the Canadian division of the UN Army.
Huh.
So yeah, that was it for him. But I think that's quite enough achievements. And he went back to Canada, and he went to live in Quebec, and he died at the age of 87 in 2008.
2008, so, only 12 years ago. So he's a vet. He was like a lifelong guy. Wow. That's interesting. What a story, huh?
Yeah, he seems like a type of Rambo character that there should be a movie made about him.
It seems like he just wanted to like impress his dad, and that's how he got started. And he just when you're young, you hear the opposite. Sometimes when you're too young, you're just immature and you're maybe not the right fit. But I guess if I take my history properly, World War II, more soldiers on the Allied side were needed. Countries were doing conscription. Some young people wanted to join. What was Canada? I mean, Canada was involved, of course, on the Ally front. So, wow. Do you think? Did he read about anything like post, like in the last couple of years of his life? If he participated in Remembrance Day or he spoke?
Yeah, there wasn't too much that I read about, but he did seem to go back to Zwolle a lot for the commemorations there. And
well, he's got a street named after him.
Like I said, I guess he was there for the inauguration of the street.
Yeah.
And but there wasn't too much that I saw about like interviews with him afterwards. And you'd think there'd be some sort of like video of him being interviewed on online somewhere, because if he lived to 2008 at the age of 87, I'd want to have some like stories about him where he's giving some accounts to validate some of the stuff.
Yeah. That's insanity. That's crazy. And so he died in Quebec, right?
He died in Quebec, and just lived a quiet life. Had a bunch of kids, and had 5 or 6 grandkids, and lived a very peaceful life afterwards. So
yeah. Let me. I got a question for you. Is like I know your dad was part of the British. Help me out here. The British Army, military, or doctor?
No, he was the Canadian.
Oh, Canadian. Yeah.
Sorry, it's very, very interesting. I mean, yeah, he that's how they came to Canada.
Yeah, but didn't you tell me like they were in Africa for a while too, somewhere?
No. So my dad, he did his medical degree in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a component that you can do like your residency or like an extra year.
Yeah.
You can do it in the UK, but you can also do it pretty much anywhere in the world. My dad chose to do it in Nigeria.
Yeah. Okay. In
So that
Nigeria.
was not connected to the army, but
Oh,
it was just to do some like initial medical training, and
and
get
then you
some
made it.
exposure. Yeah.
But I was going to ask you, do you think, have you ever thought of joining the armed forces, or have you ever applied and succeeded and decided, or, or is that not passed through your mind?
I've thought about it,
Yeah.
not seriously. I just thought about, conceptually, what would it be like if I joined the army?
Yeah.
And I think like I wouldn't handle it very well. I don't take orders
Yeah, me too.
that well. I have a bit of a rebellious streak, so I'd probably get kicked out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding all like the waking up at 5 a.m. and shining the shoes and all the exercise out in the rain and that sort of stuff. Whether I could handle that is another thing, but it's just the having orders barked at me all day long. I would probably snap and talk back pretty quickly.
Yeah, me too. I've thought about it conceptually. There are things I like about the military, but I mean, of course, I oppose a lot of policies and political views. But I like the idea of loyalty. That like, if you are there for your whole life, you could work your way up to top position. I think I like that, and I like the structure they put in place. But yeah, totally, I'm not for it. But it's interesting. I actually had two friends who immigrated to Canada a long way back. Two brothers from Bangladesh, and I was talking to them, and they said that when we first became like we got to Canada, we were in the army. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And they said, like, if we did X number of years and then we'd leave, they would pay for our education, so our university and stuff. So we were like, I don't know, the standings, or lieutenant colonel, or first I don't know, private or something like that. And then so they did their time, and they just pretty much are on the base the whole time, I think. But then when they left, they paid for their university and their college, which helped them out a lot.
Yeah,
And
that's
stuff.
great.
So like, yeah, I think I hear a lot about that. Like that, even if you go to like the RMC, the Royal Military College, it's a pretty good university apparently. Like it's good education, good standard. But in the same conversation, they were telling me that, listen, like when you go, they try to just pretty much like take away all your critical thinking whatsoever. So you just follow orders. You don't question, you don't talk back, you don't do any of that. So I'm with you. I think my critical thinking is a big part of my so I really like, I believe in what I believe in, and my morality and my ethics and my beliefs. So I don't know if I would give it up for it, but I don't know, man. Any country you go to, the military is always a big part of life, and people in the military really like, they're either like, if you're part of it, like that's your religion. You know what I mean? Like that's your life and that's your culture. And I don't know, something about it is very, very like, I understand, and like there's politics, but something about it is really off for me too. So.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, so the whole reason that my family ended up in Canada is my dad took a job in the Canadian Army as a
Totally.
doctor. But the interesting thing about his experience was, if I remember correctly, Canada, there was no active like big war going on around the world that Canada was involved with. So his time on the base, I think, was relatively dull. So they were just, doing the routine drills and trainings and all those sort of things that they do, like prepare for any eventual conflict. But when there's nothing going on, it can be a bit dry. But I mean, you're thankful for that. You don't want to always be in a war.
Well,
right.
Some people, like, I think they're big warheads and they really like violence and war. But I think the majority of people probably pray to just stay on base and never have to go.
I think if you're a level-headed person, you should think that way, because I don't know about you, but my grandfather on my mom's side, he fought in World War II, and he was involved in a lot of really impressive battles. But then he's like, there's no glory in it. He was like traumatized, and a lot of his friends were killed. So it's like, of course, you should remember and respect and all that, but like war is not something that should be.
I agree.
I think what I don't like is it's hard for me to put into words, but there's a lot of movies out on World War II.
Yeah.
And I feel like some of them glorify war and are very nationalist, and like they're meant to make you feel like a rah-rah sense of patriotism.
And it's not that at all.
And it's not that at all. And it's like, for example, why are there not that many World War I movies? Just because it was like a brutal war that, you know, just kill people in
Yeah.
ugly trench warfare. There's nothing like that romantic about it. Like,
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. I think I agree. I mean, like you got to imagine these are like just like Leo and Willie, which by the way are the most francophone names, Willie
right.
Arsenault and Léo Major. But like these are just like kids gone on to war, and you don't know if you'll come back or not. And you know your friends are being shot, and there's bombs exploding. And like I think when we see it post 80 years or 50 years or from any war, we see it on television or as a movie, and there's really a protagonist and a story, and then blah 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 blah. It's very Hollywoodized, but I can only imagine how scary of an event it is and the impact it has on you post event as well. It's not uncommon now for soldiers to have PTSD for the rest of their lives, and for what they see, it's horrific, right?
Yeah, I think the PTSD is, you know, we talked in previous episodes about how things have a name now, but this is quite rightly so.
Yeah.
Like soldiers had been suffering like this as long as wars have happened, which is forever.
Yeah.
But you know, people would come back traumatized. They'd, you know, turn to alcohol or drugs, or they'd have really a lot of trouble adjusting to regular society again because of all the horrible things they've seen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's quite correct to have a recognition of the fact that these people are traumatized and need some special treatment, because like it's definitely a big problem as far as I'm aware in the US post, you know, or during the Iraq war and Afghanistan war and all that stuff. All these soldiers, like they were going off there and they were being conscripted from like the deep South and, you know, the countryside and, you know, kind of poorer areas of the United States with not too many prospects.
Yeah.
And then they were sent off to war. So like you said, these people are very innocent in a way, and then they come back totally shattered. So
yeah,
you're
right.
Horrible.
Like, it's horrible. I mean, optimal situation, there is no more war anymore, right? But that's a very that's a dream fantasy that might not happen in the current state. I mean, there's so many different issues that come into war, right? Politics, profit, money, like you know. But like,
it's scary times. You know, there's always this momentum, I feel sometimes, towards war, and people talk these days about like the rise of China, and the US feels threatened by the rise of China, and is like you start people sometimes talk like is World War III inevitable, and it's a bit scary to think that way, because when I don't know if you remember when this year kicked off, it's hard to think about to pre-corona times. But like in January, corona was still a thing, but it wasn't like a global thing. The year kicked off with an airstrike from the United States against Iran, and they killed the leading general. I don't remember his name now. Qasem something. He was the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and that was such a provocative act.
Yeah.
That there was all these media stories like World War III. Like I remember seeing like, if this happens, then how would Russia react and how would China respond? And like, this can lead to all these things. Then 3 weeks later, coronavirus kicked off and people forgot about it.
Do you think there's ever a chance in the next few years or decades or centuries that countries would start de-escalating their armies, or is it going to keep building up? Is there any way we can get to a place where we don't have so much military around the world, this country, that country, this nuclear gridlock, this tension? I
don't know. I mean, you still look at the military budgets of the United States, and
insanity.
It's just huge. It's such an insane number that it's hard to fathom. So it is something that would be hard to demilitarize and bring down. But you know, the United States is always going to think, well, why should we cut our budget? We need to have like supremacy and not have threats to our allies, and have Russia and China or whoever challenge us. So there's always going to be that mentality, right?
For sure. I think whenever people talk about the military globally, I think the U.S. is usually like the main body that they'd refer to. And like, I'm not like some conspiracy theorist or whatever, but like the American military is insane. Like people have to understand that not only is it internally in the States, they have bases around the world. They have aircraft carriers around the world at different points. There's submarines, there's satellites, I don't know how many people are in the military personnel, but like this is this massive multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure, and like, you know, they're just on the pulse of everything that's happening that could affect them. And I think things that don't even affect them, they get involved in as well, whether or knowledge or not. But with their allies, you'll find that there are like military bases like around the world. I was actually reading something about it a couple of months back. Even in the places you wouldn't expect, they have some type of presence. And if they're not allowed there, then in a neighboring country as well. And so even like if you talk to military brats or people who grew up in the military, they're moving around from base to base internally in the country, and then being placed at like Belgrade or Ramstein in Germany, or here, you know. So it's insanity, like the structure they built. So like to answer my own question, like I don't know if there'd be a demilitarization, and there's so much writing on all this stuff, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just finished reading a book which talked about, you know, the energy system, but also about geopolitics a little bit. And one thing that was interesting that they talked about was, you know, the South China Sea.
Yeah.
It's a very contested area, which China claims as its territory, but it's like has Vietnam and the Philippines and I think Taiwan and all these countries kind of claiming some aspect to it. And I think at one point a few years ago, the U.S. as a show of force put its like an aircraft carrier through there.
Oh, really?
Because China was starting to like have battles, little skirmishes with Vietnamese boats and stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense because they have commitments to their allies in Taiwan and what have you. But I can see how China would get the mentality of that's provocation, because just think about if a Chinese aircraft carrier started going off the coast of like San Francisco, or you know,
Hawaii or something like that,
somewhere like that, it'd be crazy. Like that would be game over, because obviously the U.S. has supremacy over these things and ensures like freedom of movement for shipping. But at a certain point, China is going to be like, hey, we're a big country now. We can handle ourselves and get out of our backyard, sort of thing. So
I think politics and military, like you're just always on the edge of your seat, right? You're waiting for provocation, and then it gives you the justification to act or not act. Like, I mean, we studied this about like nuclear war around the world, right? There's, I think, a number of countries that have nuclear weapons with different quantities, but pretty much the game, if you gameplay it out, is like if somebody nukes another country or sends it off, then everyone hits the button and then it's just gone, right? And so I don't really think about it that often, but I'm with you. I don't think, I mean, I know in this day and age, like in the States especially, if you come off as saying anything negative or perhaps pessimistic or even the opposite of the default theory of supporting your military and your troops, you're seen as anti-patriotic, right? Or that's why, like, if you listen to any politician, they always end their speeches by saying, like, God bless America, God bless our troops, or bring our troops home, and it's just like a thing. And so, I don't know, man. I mean, if you're a politician and you didn't say that or you didn't believe in that, would it be anti-patriotic? Like, I don't think so, right? It just doesn't mean you want to support it, but
I mean, thankfully, I think in Canada, it's not as intertwined with the politics, and it's not like one and the same. Of course, there's commemorations and recognition of the contribution of the troops, but I don't think you should get to the point where every sentence you utter, in the U.S., it's God bless this, so the religious aspect, and then the military aspect, which, I don't know, it's unique to American culture in some ways.
I have a 95% feeling that the U.S. military is probably going to listen to this podcast. We probably triggered a couple of keywords during our job.
Yeah. What are we? We're using Zoom, aren't we, for this thing?
It's yeah.
But like I said, this Léo Major guy, he sounded very impressive. He did good work to liberate, but
I never heard of him before this. It's interesting.
That's the thing, is I never heard about him until I moved to the Netherlands, and I thought, like, hey, what's one of the things I should maybe learn about in going to school in Canada? They should teach us about this crazy Rambo dude.
Well, so no, today is Monday. On Wednesday, what will happen? And will anything happen during COVID times in the Netherlands in remembrance of Remembrance Day?
There's nothing here on November 11th, as far as I know. If anything, it would just be like the British Embassy or Canadian Embassy doing something. But no, the Netherlands doesn't, as far as I'm aware, do commemorations on November 11th.
Do you know if,
in May.
do you know if anything will happen in Canada at this point, like because of what's happening with COVID?
I would imagine they would do a distanced commemoration at the war memorial, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
Yeah, lay a wreath and maybe you listen to the, what's the song? Not, that's not a song, but like the music, or
there's the In Flanders Fields, which is the one that you learn in Canada growing up.
Yeah.
And there is, I'm also blanking. You mean the
yeah.
That.
Interesting. Well, very timely, Dave. Topic, very interesting. I thank you for presenting. I hope people listen and enjoy and comment. And I think every country's got like their heroes and their vets that they speak of. And so I learned something I didn't know about Mr. Léo Major. So thank you, David.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it kind of brings up another topic, which maybe is a bit sensitive, but there's all this movement these days to, the way you look about history and talk about history. And there's, commemorations of and statues of certain political figures are now seen as more controversial than they were years ago, right?
Yeah.
So like someone like Winston Churchill is now being seen in a different light.
Yeah.
And there was like the Churchill statues in the UK were at risk of being, defaced and taken down.
Yeah.
Which to some people would be absolutely abhorrent. The idea that
totally.
their wartime hero would be taken down. But then if you read up on his whole like history, because he had a bigger history than just World War II.
Yeah.
I think he was somehow involved in a famine in Bengal in Bangladesh.
Oh, okay.
He was involved in some really horrible decisions there. So like that's part of the aspect that gets like brought to the surface these days. So
yeah, well, I mean, not to go into like depth in the States, especially too, over the last 2 years with the movements, a lot of people who were seen as Confederates or individuals who helped create America, their statues have been coming down as well. So I guess a topic for another time. Eh?
Yeah, I guess there's different ways of commemorating and recognizing things that need to be factored into government's thinking these days.
I guess as long as we don't echo what Trump said and said there's some really good people on both sides. So like
no, we're not going to go down that road.
Yeah. Anyways, David, congratulations on a new president of the world. Congratulations on your podcast.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations on good times. But thanks, man. I'll take a look, and I hope people enjoy.
Yeah, thanks, Tosh.
All right. See you next time.
Ciao.